Will we vote? We should vote. Every one of us should vote. And this is a very important time for us to vote. And I know you've been hearing a lot about the election already. You can't hardly turn the news on or read an article in the paper if somebody isn't talking about one or the other of the candidates, either Hillary or Trump. So we've got a decision to make. Who do I vote for? And it might be hard to make that decision. But it's time, and we have about 3 months to start looking for the answers. And that brought me to that 11th chapter in verse 6, our key verse, which started out, it's impossible to please God. You ever thought about that? It's impossible to please God. I don't know what Paul was thinking about there, do you? I thought that it wouldn't be too hard to please God. Impossible to please God without faith. Tack that little thing on there, without faith. So that helps us a little bit, doesn't it? To know that maybe it's not as impossible as it sounds. We just got to have a little faith. Now I thought, well, okay, that's pretty good. What did Paul really mean? Because he went on to say, if we truly believe what? Believe that God exists. And I think that's a key word right there. Believe that God exists. Then it may not be so hard to please God. Anyone, I think it says anyone, hey, that includes all of us. Anyone who wants to, you have to want to. You know, if you want to do a good job at your work, or if you want to do a good job at school, you have to really want to do it, right? To be able to accomplish it. So if you really want to please God, then you got to want to. And what does God like more than anything else? He wants our want to be the very best that we can do. And that's all he asks. And that's not much, really. And the good thing about it is that God's going to be right there to help us want to believe in him, that he exists. Now here's where David in this psalm begins to go back and begins to pick up all the things that has happened in his life as well as in the life of God's people. And he talks about how God saw fit to make a slave out of Joseph. His brothers sold him into slavery, and he went down into Egypt, and then God left him there for a long period of time, put him in prison and all that. But then God saw fit to bring him out. When God's people had grown so large that it troubled the Egyptians, then God saw fit to go down, release Joseph from prison. Oh God, there was even a famine that struck all the land, wasn't there? So you see all the great things and miracles, and God brought his people out. And he brought them to the promised land, the land that he had promised Abraham long, long, long time ago. God keeps his promises. Sometimes I think that we probably don't believe that God really exists because we don't ask. We don't ask God for what we feel we need. I don't know if we need to know which one to vote for or not, but we ought to ask God. And I think that's what Franklin Graham was saying. Ask God. See who is a Christian. Find out the faith of the candidates. Because it's going to be important not only to the United States, but to the world. It's going to be important to God that we vote for the one that God wants in that office. God's going to take care of it. I have no doubt. But we have to do our part. And we might have to ask God, do you believe that God exists? Do you really believe that God exists? I sometimes wonder if I really believe that God exists. I hope that you're thinking about these things. Because you know, the reason I mention this is that very first verse of that 105th Psalm. David says, give thanks. Proclaim His greatness. And so we need to go back and see, where have I forgotten, or what have I forgotten to give God thanks for? And I'm reminded of a time when, as a little fellow, my dad and another fellow was cutting saw logs. And they had rolled this huge saw log. I couldn't reach around it. And I don't know how long it was, but it was pretty long. And we was kind of on a little unlevel ground, a little hillside like. And they blocked it with a couple of little rocks so it wouldn't roll on down the hill. And then the last thing that I remember, my dad said, do not get near or on that log. So they hadn't hardly turned their back. So there I was, up against that log. You know what happened? I moved it just enough that it rolled over those stones and rolled me right under that log, on the biggest end of it.